To discuss current political issues, we invited political expert Andriy Valchyshyn. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
So I would like to ask you at first, according to this information that we heard, should we expect the positive voting of European Parliament in the near future for Ukraine? Or does there are any obstacles for Ukraine on this way to visa liberalization with the European Union?
You know, Ukrainian society have worked to this abolishment of visas for so many years that, of course, there are a lot of doubts whether everything will be okay. But what we see from analytics and from analysis of European Parliament and the balance of powers over there will be no obstacles for Ukraine, hopefully. And even the procedures that was adopted and offered by European Commission later, after the debates in European Parliament, European Council will need to adopt a final decision. And basically, even if there will be 1 or 2 or 3 countries that will be against this decision, it will not influence it.
And according to the Dutch referendum, as we saw, it was the negative result for Ukraine. But later then, we have seen different positive outcome from the parliament. So how could you comment on this in this regard? What made Dutch politicians to ignore the vote of their citizens?
You know, it is not only a Ukrainian problem, the results of referendum in Netherlands. Indeed, the whole system and the whole concept of United Europe is questioned right now because a small part of people in one of the countries, they can basically block strategic decisions between European Union and other countries. So I'm not sure if they have found the decision how to exit this situation at this time. But from what we see right now, those negotiations are taking place, and they are looking how to deal with it.
Okay, we continue on with commenting on other events. So for the first time in Ukrainian history, Prime Minister of Denmark visited Ukraine. On Tuesday, April 19, he had meetings with Prime Minister of Ukraine, Volodymyr Groysman, and President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. Besides outrageous Russian aggression, Mr. Rasmussen underlined that authorities of Denmark will never recognize annexation of Crimea. Also, Danish Prime Minister expressed interest to the investment environment in Ukraine and hoped that under the ruling of a new government, a friendship between Ukraine and Denmark will be enhanced.
As the President just mentioned, I have brought with me representatives from Danish companies. More than 30 Danish companies have joined me on this visit. And I think it proves the remarkable potential and interest for further investment and more trade between our two countries. And this interest among Danish companies have certainly increased since the free trade agreement between EU and Ukraine entered into force the 1st of January this year. That's also why we have newly announced a new Danish investment facility specifically for Ukraine in order to encourage Danish companies to explore the huge potential in Ukraine.
So in this regard, could we expect further financial assistance from the European partners? Are they satisfied with the changes in our Ukrainian government?
From what we have seen from public statements, not only from Denmark, but also from other countries, new Ukrainian government has support of international community, and it is, of course, very important for Volodymyr Groysman. But the exact size of this support and when it will come and in what ways it will come will depend on the actions that will be taken by the Ukrainian government. And we know that it is in rather complicated situation because we do not have a stable majority in parliament to support governmental decisions. And more than that, those groups that are being taken as allies in parliament, they are basically controlled by oligarchs, and this can stop reforms or significantly influence them in a negative way.
Let's continue with discussing issues on Ukrainian government. The personnel appointments took place at the first meeting of the new government. The cabinet anonymously approved the candidacy of leader Укрзалізниця. He is the former head of the Polish Railways, Wojciech Balczun, and the new general director of Укрпошта became Igor Smilянський. Previously, he worked in the auditing company. More details on first meeting of the new cabinet, watch in the following story.
New ministers had come to the government meeting 2 hours before it has started. The sitting has started with opening speech of Prime Minister Volodymyr Groysman. He named the priorities of new government and articulated the first goal for Cabinet of Ministers.
Дуже багато розмов навколо того, що ліки у нас надзвичайно дорогі.
There are a lot of talks around high prices on medicines, but after the analysis of this situation, it was defined that national law and institutions do everything in order to close this market and not to allow to create the competition in quality of prices.
Не дати на ньому створити конкуренцію по якості і по цінам.
Besides medicines, there is a fight with corruption and orienting points of further economic growth in the agenda. Ministers had approved the candidacy of new head of Укрзалізниці. He is Polish reformator and well-known in Poland rocker Wojciech Valchyshyn. Mr. Groysman underlined that he is one of the best anti-corruption managers in Poland. Mr. Valchyshyn made a speech in his native language, but he promises to study Ukrainian.
Spółka jako jedyna kolej towarowa w Europie zadebiutowała na giełdzie.
Przepraszam bardzo, a всі розуміють?
Pardon me, does everyone understand?
Може бути ще англійська.
Can it be in English?
Speak English or I can speak Polish.
Ukrainian Igor Smolyansky had become a new general director of Ukrposhta. He obtained higher education in US and works in New York. He has already promised to develop finance services and to create the Post Bank. His candidacy had been also agreed unanimously. I would like to create the company which could be visited by people with pleasure and they could leave it with pleasure. These finance indexes will satisfy government and it will be financial organization which will be rising further. Minister of Infrastructure Volodymyr Omelyan is satisfied with new appointments. Finally, two biggest state companies had got two really the best leaders as a result of transparent contest. I guess that is clear signals also for the rest of the world that Ukraine continues reforms. And I thank you for your political will. During the first sitting of Cabinet of Ministers, it had been decided to create the Ministry on Issues of Temporary Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced People. Now it is headed by Vadim Chernysh. According to new minister, the institution will be created in a way of reorganization of renewing of Donbass agency.
So concerning the new appointments in the government, I would like you to express your view on the general prospects of the new government, the strategy of its work, and how the political agenda will be looking like.
So we have seen two important appointments this week, and they do have a significant influence on inner Ukrainian situation and also on international relations. Why? First of all, the new appointment to the head of Postal Service of Ukraine. You know that former director, he was perceived by media, by journalists, as a person very close to Volodymyr Groysman, and there were also speculations about some corruptional ties between them. So basically, right now, Groysman doesn't have any big wounds or red flags that he can be attacked on in this regard. And secondly, regarding the Valchyshyn, I think that it can strengthen not only the railway industry in Ukraine, but also our relations with Poland. As you know, after the revolution, many foreign experts were invited here to work in Ukraine, from Georgia, from Lithuania, but none of them were invited from Poland at the time when Poland was one of the brightest lobbyists of Ukrainian interests during the revolution, before it, and after it. So I think it is also the positive signal to Polish society, to Polish political elite, and we know that there were some changes in the ruling party in Poland, and it can be additional opportunity to build a bridge between our countries.
But this strategy, doesn't it seem similar as the previous government has, to invite the foreigners and especially people from business structures? And but what's new the new government will present?
Indeed, we see that none of the ministers are foreign citizens in the new government, and those appointments that were done, they deal only basically with business. So it is big state-owned business such as railways industry or postal service. what we'll see, what changes will be done by new government, it is too early to tell at this point, because the program that was adopted in Parliament, it is more of a political program, and it is not a strict action plan. And only during this week, Groisman gave tasks to his ministers within 30 days to prepare very precise plans of what should be done inside their ministers. And at this time, it is way too early to tell what will be the perspective for this government. At the same time, what is interesting about this government is that there were no big expectations regarding it. So when everyone expected Yatsenyuk back to 2 years ago or before the parliamentary elections of 2014, everyone expected that he will come and he will create a miracle. Yes, and even his political party was going on this line, support our party and get Yatsenyuk to become a prime minister. So now, in general public and in civil society, there are no very high expectations, and anything that will be done in the correct way will be perceived very well.
And what about the future of the coalition? Should we expect the new elections to come?
My personal opinion is that yes. Of course, situation stabilized a little bit, but even during this week, we've seen that there is no stable majority, and those discussions regarding Prosecutor General and some other very important decisions that should be taken and passed through Parliament, they show that for each and every case, for each and every law, those small groups that have formed a coalition together with Bloc Petro Poroshenko and Narodny Front, and those are basically two groups. One group Vidrodzenia that is being associated with Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky, and second one, Voля Narodu, that is associated with a business group of Igor Yeremeyev, who is not alive anymore. But anyway, those groups, they will try to push their interests, and we'll see very long-lasting effects of such sorts of cooperation, and they can increase the political instability. For example, to my mind, the election law will not be changed. So even though there were many complaints on the majority system, part of the voting system in Ukraine, indeed it will not be changed, because those groups, they are basically represented by members of parliament that were elected through this system, and it is not good for them to change anything, because they control those small election districts and they are satisfied with their result. Secondly, we should take a close watch to what will be new appointments in the governmental structure and on the positions of the directors of the most important factories and other industries, because those groups, I think that they will try to lobby their interests and their people to have access to budget and to continue doing business as usual. So basically, with formation of new government and this coalition, situation was stabilized. But even from insiders from Bloc Petro Poroshenko or Narodny Front, they expect early elections during the spring of next year.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our guest was political expert Andriy Valchyshyn.